For years, Washington told Europe, do more for your own defense. Well, Europe listened. Defense budgets are up, new EU rules are pushing joint procurement, and NATO has added some frontline muscle. But Wallander's warning is in the title. Be careful what you wish for. A more capable, more autonomous Europe also means a Europe that can say no to U.S. preferences on Russia, Iran, and defense industrial deals, and that shifts the logic of American power. The big lesson, U.S. burden sharing and U.S. influence are not the same thing. As Europe spends more, integrates defense industries, and leads more inside NATO, it gains leverage to pursue its own strategies, sometimes aligned with Washington, sometimes not. That's not anti-American. It's the predictable byproduct of the autonomy the United States asked for. The real policy test is whether Washington can adapt to a partnership of near equals without losing access, economic advantage, or strategic coordination. First, the spending surge is real and structured. By 2024, non-U.S. NATO members had sharply increased equipment outlays, and the EU loosened fiscal rules to allow more deficit space for defense through 2030. Brussels also proposed a long-term €163.5 billion loan pool to finance military procurement, accelerating joint buys like a $5.6 billion Patriot missile deal among 5 EU states. That's capacity and cohesion Europe didn't have a decade ago. Second, industrial policy has strings. Money from that EU pool must flow to European defense firms. U.S. products might qualify only if manufactured in Europe with European workers and taxes. Even where production helps U.S. supply chains, say sourcing fuses or explosives, tariff rules could still label goods as European imports, dulling the benefit to American companies. Third, Europe is stepping up inside NATO. Since 2017, the alliance has established 9 battle groups along its front line with distributed leadership. Sweden leads in Finland, the UK in Estonia, Germany and Lithuania, Spain and Slovakia, France and Romania, Italy and Bulgaria, Hungary its own group, Canada and Latvia, while the US leads only in Poland. Europe's growing capacity lightens Washington's burden. Fourth, autonomy brings policy divergence, starting with Russia. The United States has floated step-by-step sanctions relief as part of negotiations. Europe has drawn a red line, no lifting sanctions until Ukraine is ready. Europe also holds 2/3 of the $330 billion in frozen Russian assets and hosts SWIFT. Those facts give Europe decisions outsized weight over U.S. options. Fifth, U.S. access and overflight aren't guaranteed for every mission now. Historically, American hegemony inside NATO delivered generous ABO, which is access, basing, and overflight. Terms that Europe often granted even when it disagreed, from the Azores in 1973 to Iraq in 2003. But if transatlantic purpose keeps fraying, Wallander argues that future requests, for example, basing to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, could be denied, forcing the United States to launch from further away and at higher risk. Finally, there's a nuclear wrinkle. If European trust in the U.S. security guarantee erodes, leaders are already debating whether Europe needs its own credible deterrent. France and the UK have nuclear forces, but not at U.S. scale or diversity. One reason the conversation about a European deterrent is intensifying as U.S. policy signals keep shifting. None of these erase the upside for Washington. European purchase of U.S. systems like F-35s, for example, have bolstered American defense industrial base. From 2022 to 2024, Europe bought $61 billion worth in U.S. defense systems, and the U.S. share of European imports rose from 54% to 64%. But as Europe's spending nears U.S. levels, at least as a share of GDP, respectively for each country, and its economy outweighs America's in aggregate, the relationship is moving toward parity. So for conclusion, Wallander's bottom line, Washington is getting the Europe it asked for, richer in capability and voice. That's good for shared security, but it narrows America's ability to set terms unilaterally. The smart play is to update expectations. So compete for Europe's partnership on economics, respect EU industrial priorities, where possible, coordinate Russia policy with Europe's leverage in mind, and protect the ABO advantage that make U.S. global power practical. In a more equal alliance, influence is earned, not assumed. So basically this episode kind of summarizes Celeste A. Wallander's essay in the July/August 2025 Foreign Affairs magazine, right? So this is titled Beware the Europe You Wished For. So Wallander is, for a little bit of a kind of a author's background, she is a executive director of Penn Washington and an adjunct senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security. She was Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs and oversaw U.S. military assistance to Ukraine during the Biden administration. So, with that being said, the entire issue was a pretty decent read, so I suggest going out and getting it. And as always, put your own point of view in the comments and stuff below, because that's kind of the whole point of all these episodes anyways, is the interaction and so on. So I will see you on the next one.